Hi there, and welcome to the Fairview Church Podcast. My name is Lydia McMillan. I'm the Connections Director, and I'm here with
John Spallino, one of the pastors.
Awesome, and we are so excited as we're going to talk about fall festivals, fall-like things, and
Halloween.
Halloween, absolutely.
All the things about Halloween that everyone loves.
Tell us more. Where did Halloween begin? How did it get started?
Sure. We're going to go into a little bit of a nerdy deep dive on the origins of Halloween, and then we'll talk about some like practical elements a little bit later on. So,
Great.
All Hallows Eve, Halloween, it means All Saints, and it was the night before All Saints' Day. So we need to go back over 1,000 years ago, if not more, to when Christians are being persecuted. They are being martyred for their faith, and the Christian church was commemorating or remembering these saints. And so they had something called All Saints' Day to remember these saints and to remember their sacrifice of their life, for Christ. And so they would spend a day to remember, and they would celebrate the lives of the saints, and by the way, saints being believers in Christ, and so we see even in the Gospels letters written to the saints and they'll name a city, and so it's believers are these saints, and so we have these known and unknown saints that have given up their life for Christ that they're remembering on that day to commemorate their sacrifice, and so you have this day to honor the faithful and to remember what they've done. But by the 17th century, the Pope at the time, Pope Boniface IV, he goes to the Pantheon and he renames the Pantheon. Now that was generally a place in Rome that had all the different Greek gods and all that kind of stuff. Well, he replaces all that and renames it to honor all of the Christian martyrs.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah, so this is a pretty big turning point for the empire.
Absolutely.
And then what ends up happening is that this starts this like All Saints' Day of remembering for the Christian believers. And then a pope later on, Pope Gregory, I think it was the third or the fourth, he ends up declaring November 1st as that day. Like we're going to look at the first to remember those people. And so it was based off of a practice of just remembering the saints, which ended up leading to a declaration of these martyrs, which then ended up into a specific day in the Christian calendar where you would remember the faithful that's there. So then a little after that, the Christianity starts spreading into the Celtic regions. Okay. And they come face to face with a festival of the harvest called Samhain. Now, Samhain actually has 4 parts to it throughout the years, just to talk about the changing of the times, changing of the seasons and those types of things. But the one that is centered around kind of that fall also had this element of, at Samhain, there is this very thin veil between the spiritual realm and the physical realm. And so when Christianity started spreading into these regions, you had this practice or this festival that was happening where people were afraid of death. They were afraid of the dead. And so you would have them lighting bonfires to ward off the spirits.
Oh, interesting.
You would have them offering food up to kind of dedicate to their ancestors if they were to come over to the realm for one night, to the physical realm. But then they would also wear disguises in order to distract from evil spirits that might be there, to kind of disorient them. And so you have these kind of really are these practices in this culture. And you have these Christians who come in and it's celebrated like at the same time. And so what Christianity did as it started to minister and evangelize is they look at Samhain and they say, we need to not celebrate that, but we need to redeem it. And so these people are afraid of death, they're afraid of these evil spirits, but we know that what Christ has done is he allows us not to be afraid of death. And we have the Spirit living inside us to ward off. We don't need bonfires. We have the Holy Spirit residing inside of us to ward off any of these evil things. And so you see them reclaiming and really starting to spread a message of hope and generosity of the gospel. And so it just kind of coincided that you have All Hallows Eve and All Saints' Day remembering what Christ has done for us on the cross, and the martyrs that have given up their life for Christ. And not even that, now we can celebrate all saints. Those have gone before us that have lived faithful Christian lives, we can celebrate. But it was remembering that day and then sharing with the culture that you don't actually have to be afraid of these things. And so it ended up becoming Christians, the church, reclaiming it, and there were still some elements of that that were there, and so dressing up and food, candy, some of those things. That was still a part of it. But over time, we don't celebrate sowing anymore, at least in our part of the world, and we don't. And even like the Christian All Saints Day, there's many traditions that don't necessarily celebrate that either. And so today it's become like a pretty secularized way of just giving candy, meeting your neighbors, and that kind of stuff. But those are the origins. But what's interesting, though, before we jump into the next question, is Martin Luther picked the day that he nailed the 95 Theses, or supposedly nailed the 95 Theses on the wall at Wittenberg. He did so on All Hallows Eve, and he did it specifically so that people would be reminded on the day that they're remembering all the martyrs who died for the gospel, what they died for. And so it was a very purposeful date, and not just something arbitrary that he picked October 31st, 1517, to nail the 95 Theses to the door, or supposedly nailed it, because there is some contention there on whether or not he did or not. But that's why he picked that day, because it was a very influential day within the Christian calendar as people are remembering their loved ones and what they died for. And he was calling them back to that faith that they died for. So that's a little bit of the origins there.
Very good. Yeah. So it's so interesting to see how early Christians responded to that in that era. But then now, how do Christians respond or react differently to the holiday?
Yeah, so there's much that we can take from the way that they responded. I think there's different perspectives on this issue. Yeah. So I know very faithful Christians who will not have anything to do with Halloween.
Absolutely.
And they're convictional on that, and praise God for that. I think that's totally fine. And so I know some that keep it at arm's length. They will not do anything with it. They won't pass out candy. They won't do anything, and that's totally fine. What I would just say if you find yourself in that camp, if there's a family listening who finds themselves in that camp, then I would say, don't just not celebrate. That's not good English. But don't allow in your life just to avoid it, but make that night purposeful for your family regardless. And so even if it's, hey, we're going to do a Bible study together, we're going to pray together, or we're going to talk and remember some of the saints that have gone on before us to see how they lived their lives and to draw encouragement. That's a way to make it intentional. So I guess that would be the point.
That's a great
So
way.
instead of just avoiding it and just saying we're not doing anything, do something intentional with your family, just so that you can use the time that you have with your family for gospel means. And so that's one option for folks, and that's a viable one. But then you have this other camp that gets a little bit more messy on how it happens. But you have the camp that I maybe call the reclaim with discernment or engage with generosity, or charity. And so you've got this other group that says, hey, we are going to participate within this, but the intent is not to celebrate necessarily the holiday, but to reclaim or to be generous. It's to be charitable. It's to meet our neighbors. It's to build those connections, because, really it's the only night of the whole entire year where your neighbors are coming to your door.
Yeah.
You don't have to do anything.
That's true.
And so it is a massive opportunity for Christians, even if we don't want to use the term, or some might use the term celebrate, but some might not use the word celebrate, but instead, they might use the word just reframe or re-engage, or, make it purposeful with a Christian intent. And so I think today there's that camp, and that can look differently between families. But there are some words of caution there within that, because I don't think, like my family, we'll set out a table of hot chocolate and pass out candy, and then we will meet our neighbors and discuss with them. But we do have restrictions, and in our household of okay, what kind of costumes are they allowed to wear?
Yes.
what are the things that we are trying to encourage in this? And
Yeah.
so like when our boys ask us things like, are you celebrating this holiday? We don't really use that term, and it's not wrong to use it,
Yeah.
but it is more of we are reclaiming this, or we are going to use it for God's glory.
Absolutely.
And so we try to kind of avoid some of that language
Yeah.
because there is some things, a part of it still, that are not God glorifying. And so it is still common with several cults, for example,
Yes.
that this is like their main time. When you have the moon and the crystals and all those different things, you have witchcraft and demonic activity, and that stuff is all real, like witches and demons. That's all real realities that we have to live with in our life.
Yeah.
And this is a night that a lot of people, even if they don't believe in those things,
Yeah.
they celebrate those things.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and there's we could talk about maybe some reasons in a little bit of why I think they celebrate those things, but there's a way in which that they celebrate things that really are not ungodly, that might be demonic. And to me, that's a word of caution to say whatever it is for the Christian and how you want to reframe it or utilize it for the gospel.
Yeah.
We also need to be careful, though, not to indulge in or celebrate the demonic or the like Wiccan or the pagan elements of
yeah.
it. We
Yeah.
need to be very careful of how we're going about doing that.
Absolutely.
Just to make sure we're not blurring any lines.
Yeah, yeah. So you have younger kids, and then some of our listeners may have, some students, teens. How do you start having those conversations, or how do you frame that out as you're talking about this holiday to them?
Well, first I talk about how it is a very popular holiday. I think statistically it's only the third most popular holiday.
What's
but
1 and 2?
Christmas is number one.
Okay.
They said number two is Thanksgiving, but I think that's not true.
Okay.
I think Halloween is definitely more popular than Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
But that's just me. But it seems to be, though, very popular in our culture. And like if you
Absolutely.
go to my neighborhood, for example, no one really decorates for Christmas, but everyone decorates for
There's
Halloween.
so many more decorations
It
for
is
Halloween.
absolutely insane. And they're getting bigger and bigger every year. It's like,
Absolutely.
have you seen those like 20-foot
Oh, they're terrifying.
things?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's just a lot of people love this holiday.
Well, you
And so
can't miss it.
We can't miss it, and you can't disengage from it. It's not
Yes,
like you can,
yes.
tell your kids just to look down and not look up while you're driving the car. You're going to see
Yeah.
it everywhere.
Absolutely.
And so for me, it really depends on the age of your child.
Yeah.
But it is like for right now, like my kids, we talk through what's appropriate and not appropriate
Yes.
about Halloween. So when they ask, hey, I want to be this for Halloween, I'm like, yeah, we don't do that. Like you're just not going to be X,
Yeah.
but what else do you want to be? And then normally they're like, I want to do this. And like, okay, like, well, you name things until we find one that's suitable,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that you can engage with your friends and you can go out and trick or treat, and
Yes.
get your candy. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to teach them how to have boundaries and how we think through kind of cultural dynamics.
Absolutely.
I think for older kids, to me, it would be more of why are you choosing to pick that costume? So if it is something that resembles something like very gory
Yeah.
or very scary or very horror-like, okay, why? Like what is, is there something God glorifying about that? And trying to talk through with your child,
Absolutely.
what is appropriate, what's not appropriate, so they can make better decisions in the future, or have that responsibility. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want our kids to think critically
Yeah.
about these things. So that'd be one thing that I would start off with, is just kind of laying some boundaries of what my family does.
Yes.
And explaining age appropriately why that's the case, right? And so, for example, the other day, Jonathan said, why do we have pumpkins on the front porch, right?
Great question.
And it was simple, because it's fall, right? We're trying to decorate our porch, right?
There you go.
But what we don't have, again, I'm not faulting any of my neighbors for this, because they
Yeah.
have all different priorities and perspectives. Some of them
Absolutely.
are not believers. But like, we're not doing the very scary horror houses and that kind of stuff,
Absolutely.
in our
No
neighborhoods.
judgment house?
No
At the
judgment house
Spallino?
either. No judgment house either. So there's elements of which where we are not like fully, engaging in that, but that's okay. But, it's just using those opportunities when they ask questions, kind of talk
Absolutely.
through it. But it's also reminding them of what it was meant for, right?
Yeah.
So I think something that is important is to say, hey, as much fun as this is, we have a hope that we don't have to fear death. We have a hope that Christ has, given his life for us so that we can be faithful in our witness here, and we can remember those that are gone before us. So I think it'd be really neat to, look back, find a really good story of a saint that was martyred. You have older versions of that, like you can go back in church history and look that up. But there are books like the Fox's Book of Martyrs that you could look up that have really good stories of those who've given up their life for Christ. And you can just start engaging that way of saying, hey, as fun as this is, fun as getting candy is, we have a better hope. Let's dwell on and think about a story of a believer who gave their life to Christ and made a huge sacrifice for that. And let's, contemplate how we can be more faithful to Christ in this season.
Absolutely.
How we can exemplify that same type of devotion to God because of their example.
Absolutely.
And so there's ways in which you can utilize that to kind of help frame that. But setting boundaries is probably the most important thing to start the conversation because they, as parents, as kids, they need to know where their parents kind of stand on, what's the extent of which we're doing this here. And then from there, there's, if you have teenagers, you can set boundaries of what they wear and stuff, but at some point you have to give them freedom and to make decisions. And so it's more of asking the heart behind it at that point. Like with my kids, I could just say no, right? 'Cause they're younger. But as they're getting older, we would not be doing a good service to them if we were not asking the heart questions behind why do you want to be this?
Right.
And why do you, and sometimes it's as simple, I just want to look cool. But sometimes it does reveal a heart, and this is where we can get to why I think kids, particularly today, like teenagers and up, they love horror movies and they love dressing very audaciously at Halloween. And I believe it's because in our culture, we are, every other culture that has lived before modern medicine was understood death. And they understood the cycle, and while they all had their own issues when it came to looking at death and experiencing it with their own psyche and psychology and the thought processes, what we really have now is complete opposite in our culture where no one likes talking about it. We don't know what to say when somebody passes, or we're afraid of death at all costs. But we see it everywhere, and it's talked about everywhere. And so what do you do when you're afraid of something, but it's everywhere? Well, you need to do something. And so what I think our culture has done is they made light of it. They have desensitized, or they laugh at those things. It's a fun game to do these things. When in reality, when you think about some of the elements of it, it really is very not only scary, but it reminds you of death, and that's something that should be taken not lightly and should be taken seriously. And so I really believe that the reason why some of our students today and this generation, some of the generations, even including mine, like I know in my generation, parents who have little kids, they love celebrating. They decorate their houses, and albeit it's very scary ways, but it makes the night come alive, for the kids. And it does give you a little bit of a spook, and the reality is I think that's all a part of our culture not knowing to do with death. And how to really respond to death. And so that to me is where, in any of these things, whether you try to avoid it or you're going to try to reclaim it and meet your neighbors and try to, get to know them. And you may not, I don't suggest on Halloween night you share the gospel with your neighbors. Now, if there's an opportunity, great. But if everyone's getting a piece of candy and you're trying to shove, a gospel conversation in, that's probably not going to go well, right? It's probably not going to happen well because you just don't have enough time, and it's not the setting for it. But what you can do is be a light and meet your neighbors that you've never met before, build that relationship, and then invite them over for dinner a week from then. And start building that relationship to see, is there a gospel opportunity there? And so that to me is where we can do that. But in both those camps, whether you try to avoid it or try to reframe it and use it for gospel witness, is we all need to be teaching the goodness of who Christ is, and that we don't have to be afraid of death. We don't have to be afraid of the end because of what Christ has accomplished for us.
Absolutely.
And that to me is where the teaching moment comes. And so
Yeah.
wherever you stand as a parent and you're going through this, you need to be thinking critically how I can utilize this as a teaching moment
Yes.
to share about what we have in Christ.
Absolutely. I love how you're laying that framework for really a biblical worldview as you're having those conversations, not just one day out of the year, but really saying, okay, this is an ongoing conversation as a family, even when we encounter others and we talk to others, but also what are we saying and doing beyond these moments. I think that that's so important. And ways that we can be a light and making those connections as we talk about our mission is reaching our neighbors with the true freedom found in full surrender to Christ, and how even more so we can lean into this day. Is there any other things that we can take away from our conversation today?
The only thing I would just share is, as a family, there's no right or wrong, in my opinion, on whether you choose to engage or not engage.
Absolutely.
We don't want to. I think it'd be wrong for those who remove themselves and withdraw themselves to cast the pagan card on those that decide to use it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it would be wrong for those that try to reframe it to look at those that withdraw and say, you don't love your neighbors. I don't think that's the case whatsoever. I think convictionally, this is a matter of your family and what you believe. And I do think there are some dangers in that. So, for example, if my family had any ties or history into paganism or Wicca, then I probably wouldn't celebrate it.
Yes.
Right? And so if you have those things, then I would be very careful and cautious about indulging in Halloween from a secular standpoint, right?
Absolutely.
So again, there's those dynamics that I would think through on an individual basis on whether or not it's appropriate or not.
Yeah.
But I don't think this is a issue of faithfulness when it comes to the gospel, if you choose to engage or not engage. Just have those cautions if you are going to engage, and be a good light, regardless if you're at home or if you are going to engage on Halloween.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for this conversation as we dove into the origins and what we can do with this holiday.
Well, thank you, Lydia. I appreciate it. All righty. Well, hey, folks, if you're watching, if you could leave us a like, a subscribe, or a review wherever you're listening or watching, that would be great. And blessings to you. Bye.